Good morning.
Hi, Michelle.
Hey,
Will we
Ray.
taking? Yes.
Eve Haverfield asked me to make a brief announcement, and I also talked to Jan about announcing the website for our shirts. Maybe I could do that just before public comment. If that's all right.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Thanks.
I guess Eve had all the bases covered because she asked me to do it as well. So that's
Oh,
fine.
feel
That's
free.
fine. No. You go right ahead. That's fine. Is there public comment today, Roger?
That's your prerogative, but we would recommend yes.
All right.
It's on the agenda.
It sure is. Okay. Are we ready to go?
Sure.
You ready to go, Michelle?
I am. Thank you.
Okay, anytime you want to put us on. We're on? Okay. All right, I'll call the meeting to order. This is a special meeting of the Town Council of Fort Myers Beach. It's Friday, May 1st, 2020. And we'll start as always with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll stand and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God, liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I'm going to make before we get on with public comment, I'm going to make a brief statement here in light of everything that's been going on. So if you bear with me for a moment. As you know, on Wednesday, April 29th, Governor DeSantis, after explaining that the state of Florida's experience with coronavirus has been significantly better than predicted and reported in some news outlets, he determined the vast majority of the state was ready to begin to reopen and initiated phase one, a safe, smart, step-by-step plan for Florida's recovery. You will notice that the governor did not turn the switch from off to on, but is rather using a phased methodology based on facts and data to move forward. We on Fort Myers Beach have proceeded under the same phased approach as the state, with strict compliance with the federal and state safer in place policies. Others have not. Unfortunately, this resulted in significant violations of the recommended social distancing protocols locally on Wednesday, which could have been avoided by delaying a few days. I pray no one gets sick as a result of that. We now know what Sanibel and our sister cities are doing as we face these challenges together. We know what the state will be allowing effective May 4th. Our businesses now know what is expected of them and are making the necessary adjustments to their business operations. Our local task force has provided some guidance to both our businesses and council to augment the state's recommendations on how they plan to keep their customers safe. As we consider changes to our previously declared declarations, by waiting these last few days, we are now no longer put into a position where we are speculating. We have direct, clear knowledge from the governor and the mayors on which to formulate our decisions. I believe we should respect our governor and his guidance. We should respect, encourage, and help our businesses to reopen. I do not think there is much risk in starting to move forward today versus waiting until Monday. By taking action today, we will have the benefit of assessing our changes on Monday. Consequently, and therefore, I recommend that we open our beaches and parking. And for exercise, I recommend that we open up the Mound House and Bay Oaks grounds for exercise, the outside grounds, all tomorrow. In fact, not only these are my recommendations, but as long as I'm going on, I'll make that a motion. And if there's a second, we'll move on with that. Is there a second to that motion?
Ray, I feel uncomfortable making a second before we've had public comment this morning.
Well, I have a feeling that all that public comment is going to be based on those matters right there. So if is there a second or is there no? Does anyone wish to?
I'll second that motion.
Go second that. Jim Adderholt, second. Okay, now we'll discuss it. Discussion.
Well,
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bill.
I just
Oh,
had
go
a
ahead,
question. Happy to second that, but so we'll debate this and discuss this before we have the public comment. Is that what your thinking is?
You know what? If it's the will of the council to wait, I'll wait. But I just wanted to let you know right out front where I was on this. And if you want to wait till after the public comment, that's fine. But
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think it's great that you've led out with this and set the table for the discussion for today, and I support that. And I second that motion. I do think it would be helpful to have that public comment before we debate and vote.
okay. Is that the will of the other members as well?
Yeah, I concur.
Okay, everybody, Mr. Allers?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay, well then I'll remove my motion for the time being, and then we'll pick this up right after the public comment. Michelle, lead us out with the public comment, please.
Ray, I had asked if I could make.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rexanne. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor. I'm sorry. You had two quick announcements to make. Go right ahead. I'm sorry about that.
Yes, I'm particularly glad to get to say something positive this morning in some things that are going on with the beach. Number one, everybody may notice that our council is rather informally dressed today. We're all wearing our Pound We Are FMB shirts. This is a movement here on the beach of several different groups of people working together to try to help our folks in the hospitality industry. If you buy a t-shirt or make a donation, the money is being used to buy gift cards for food for these folks. If you are interested in participating in this, the way to do so and to find out more information about this project is to go to Fort Myers Beach CF.com, which is the website for the Fort Myers Beach Community Foundation. So it's Fort Myers Beach CF. The other good news that I have to share is I was contacted by Eve Haverfield of Turtle Time, who shared with me the excellent news that night before last, actually the morning after they were discovered night before last, they discovered 5 turtle nests on the beach. Eve has been doing this for more than 30 years and says this is something that she has never even seen occur, that 5 are discovered in one morning. So this is excellent news for us. She'd like to remind everybody to please make sure that you take your beach furniture off the beach and that you're following the lighting requirements. The turtles are coming early this year, so we need to start following those requirements as soon as possible. And she also asked me to remind folks that if they happen to be out and see a turtle, to stay away from it. Don't shine lights on it. Please don't photograph it. Please don't follow or touch the sea turtles. But 5 nests is just an amazing thing, and I'm thrilled to hear it. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I have received 12 emails through the public comment email address. None of them appear to have been sent to the council. They all seem to have come to that one address, and I have not received any past 8:30 this morning. The first is from Amy Schubert, S-C-H-U-B-E-R-T. During the last meeting, someone mentioned only allowing half capacity in vacation rentals. This would be so unfair to those of us who have 2 units. Our building is never filled to capacity in spring and summer, so limiting is silly. People will be social distancing, and most of the vacation rentals out there have no place where everyone gathers except a pool. That concludes her comment. The next is from Brian Rossler, Roessler. I am Brian Rossler. I am the general manager for the Lighthouse Resort Inn and Suites. This resort has been in my family since the early 1960s. I wish to thank the council for amending our hotel reopening date to May 15, 2020. This pandemic has hurt a lot of good people and businesses, and I feel that getting back to normal as soon as possible is a great way to start our mental and financial healing process. My main reason for this email is to ask you to reconsider that restriction to taking any pre-bookings for May 15 and moving forward. Hotels are empty and typically rely on advanced bookings to fill the rooms. Without being able to accept reservations in advance, I am unable to showcase my hotel on travel sites like Expedia, Hotels.com, Travelocity, etc., because I cannot show availability. I think that reopening on May 15 was a very wise choice, and the closures we endured were necessary ones. But I believe simply taking a reservation for a future date will not circumvent the intention of why the reopening date was established. Thank you for your time. Brian Roessler, Lighthouse Island Resort. This next is from Mike Smith, 5246 Estero Boulevard. As a property owner on the beach, I do appreciate the caution that the council has taken regarding the beach reopening in order to contain the spread of the virus. However, I respectfully ask that the opening rules be adjusted to allow for full access to the beach, with the requirement that social distancing and specific limits on group size be required. Given the beach's size, for most of the beach, social distancing should be easily achievable. It seems the concern would seem to be in those beach areas that are prone to congestion, for example, at the Lani Kai. I don't have an answer to that concern other than working with resorts to establish beach marked areas for their customers that follow social distancing guidelines and place focus on enforcement there. But it does not seem reasonable to keep the entire beach access constrained as a solution to that issue. Rather, target solutions for the areas most likely to have a social distancing problem. Thanks for receiving and considering input, Mike Smith. This next is from Barbara Rugraff, Rougraff, 4730 Estero. Now that Lee and Collier County have reopened their beaches and the governor is allowing restaurants and retail establishments to open on Monday, I think Fort Myers Beach should open to the public. We can use the same guidelines of social distancing that the other beaches are practicing. If we keep F&B closed, it will increase the number of people on other beaches and make social distancing more difficult. Also, we need to consider the economic effect of keeping the beach closed to all the businesses on the island. If we don't allow the public on the beach, they won't have any reason to come to the island and shop in our stores and eat at our restaurants. Please open the beach. Thank you. This next is from Jay Riley, Anchorage Street. The decisions made in the last few weeks by this council did not seem to be based on actual science, much less common sense. Emotions were high, I understand, but we happen to live in a country founded on the principle of individual liberty. The Constitution of the United States and that of the state of Florida make no provision for your emotional decisions to close up the town and mandate where and when the citizens may socialize or meet one another, or that they must carry identification while covering their faces and not sit on the beach. Please consider your oath to uphold the Constitution in the future. It must not be ignored because you think it prudent or feel it's better for the citizenry. We can all make decisions for ourselves when it comes to being safe. Your recent actions will have consequences. These consequences will not manifest themselves immediately. Things will never be the same in Fort Myers Beach or anywhere else for that matter, but the damage done by emotional reactionary decisions will become quite noticeable at some point in the very near future, I fear. U.S. Attorney General William Barr said it best, I think, quote, "The Constitution is not suspended in times of crisis. We must, therefore, be vigilant to ensure its protections are preserved." He also ordered federal prosecutors across the U.S. to identify coronavirus-related restrictions from state and local governments, quote, "that could be violating the constitutional rights and civil liberties of individual citizens." Thank you for your time. This next is from Distinctive Beach Rentals, 2801 Estero. Dear Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members, and Town Manager, my name is Amy Lowry. My husband and I are owners of Distinctive Beach Rentals and 20-year island residents. I am writing to you concerning our vacation rental business. At this past Monday's meeting, you agreed to allow vacation rentals to reopen for reservations as of May 15th. As you are aware, Governor DeSantis has placed an indefinite suspension on vacation rentals in the state of Florida as per his executive order. I know your meeting today is to discuss how to move forward with hotels here on the island. I would respectively ask that you consider amending the decision you made on Monday to reflect that vacation rentals on Fort Myers Beach may open once the governor's order has been lifted, so that no additional meeting must be held by our town, allowing us to get back to work immediately after that. I would also ask that you reach out to Governor DeSantis to ask him to lift his ban on vacation rentals. It makes more sense to open a single-family home where guests can self-isolate with their family while still enjoying a vacation, rather than a hotel where they would be commingling with other visitors in common areas, elevators, stairwells, etc. Thank you for your time and consideration on this matter. Distinctive Beach Rentals. This next is from Gregory Skasny, S-C-A-S-N-Y. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members, the time to open the beaches in accordance with recent county guidelines is now. You are hurting every citizen on this island by trying to keep the unconstitutional draconian beach restrictions in place. The county commission has voted to sensibly open the county beaches with no restrictions and to follow CDC guidelines, as you know. The council should have done the same on Tuesday. Please take the opportunity to do so now. In addition, I feel both the residents of the island and the off-island visitors deserve an explanation as to why an emergency council meeting was not called on Tuesday, as was requested by Lee County Commissioner Brian Hammond. This was a reasonable request, and if there is not a logical reason for delaying, then the people with the ability to call emergency council meetings are playing politics with our liberties, and that is not acceptable. Those in power hold a great responsibility when they temporarily suspend our liberties for the safety of the Republic and its citizens. To not restore those liberties at the earliest possible moment is an abuse of that power. Thank you for your consideration, Gregory Skasny. The next email is from David Nussbaum, President Island Winds Condominium Association. But interestingly, it was sent to the public comment, but it starts out addressed only to Vice Mayor Hossafras. At your April 27 special town council meeting, you asked for input from private beachfront owners. Island Winds Condominium Association, located at 6610 Estero Boulevard, is currently zoned multifamily residential and is also a private beachfront owner, no different than any individual residential owner. Our latest boundary survey was submitted to the town in 2018. He says, for reference, I've also submitted a copy with this email. If anyone would like me to forward that to them, I'd be happy to. The board of directors at Island Winds acknowledged the importance of the town's efforts to minimize the incursion of people on the beach, on the public beach areas, and we responded in kind. We currently recognize our beachfront frontage as a condominium limited common area. To support the town's efforts, our board closed off our beach area to owners and guests, much in the same way other limited common areas within our complex were closed off to prevent potential virus spread. With the crowds gone and with Lee County opening their public beaches on Wednesday with very few restrictions, we believe it is time for the town council to reduce or eliminate these restrictions on FMB's public beaches. Our board will respond in kind on ours. We wish to remain good citizens, but we also wish to state for the record, per our deed, our beach is our backyard. Thank you for your consideration. David Nussbaum, President, Island Winds Condominium. This next is from Trey Gillette, Tuckaway Cafe, 2301 Estero. Fort Myers Beach Council, please follow Florida's plan against COVID-19 and the governor's Florida Phase 1 to reopen businesses in Florida. Please do not put any other rules, regulations, or ordinances that will inhibit the businesses to operate during this reopening. Also, please get in line with Lee County to fully open the town of Fort Myers beaches from dusk to dawn. Tuckaway Cafe. The next email is from Michael Hagen, Hagen, Cane Palm Beach Condominium Association. Cane Palm is planning for reopening earliest June 1 and latest July 1. We believe this can be done in a safe and responsible manner, and the plans reflect that. All unit entry doors are to walkways and they open the out of doors, no hallways. Plans to control entry to the elevator and stairwells include specific guidelines. Plans to control the number of persons at the pool are specific. There is no restaurant or bar. Plans for the staff and guests include social distancing measures, hand sanitizers, etc. Cane Palm is a real business. It has a staff, building, and grounds that must be maintained. Cane Palm has not laid off any staff or ceased any of the day-to-day operating functions. The SBA denied our request for a loan under the CARE Act. PPP due to our corporate status along with thousands of other Florida condominium associations similarly structured. Tax-paying unit owners are now bearing all the costs directly through special assessments. Historically, the late spring, summer time reflects limited numbers of visitors. It is an ideal time for vacation rental properties to begin the reopening process, practice and adjust before the late 2020 to 2021 season. Many of the rental customers are from Florida. Everyone invested in the town of Fort Myers Beach is financially impacted, whether it be residents, property owners, workers, or others, and the town itself. We need a reopening plan that restores financial viability with the certainty of a start date. We ask the town of Fort Myers Beach approve a reopening plan that includes opening the beaches during daylight hours, parks, parking, restaurants and bars, vacation rentals, and hotels. No one should be excluded. Lee County has opened its beaches, parks, and parking. We ask the town of Fort Myers Beach to appeal to Governor DeSantis to treat vacation rentals like other businesses in opening Florida. Thanks for your consideration. Michael Hagen, President, Cane Palm Beach Condominium Association. The next is from Annette Strahan, Strahan, 2205 Crystal Drive, Fort Myers, 33907. Good afternoon, FMB City Hall team. Due to this widespreading COVID-19 virus and to save our beach lovers, our beaches are requested to be closed until this virus is stopped to prevent more unnecessary murders now, ? There are possibly more infected victims on the beach socializing with non-skilled infected people against warning. Thank you for your time and emergency action in this virus ordeal. Nikki. This email is from the Wills Murphy. It's all one word. THEWILSMURPHY. In my opinion, opening our beach to the public right now is not an idea. My reasoning is that it will bring too many people here. They will be spreading their germs in stores, restaurants, and crowd the island. And that concludes the public comment emails I've received. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for your comments.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if I may, just for a second, I had a call from Chuck Bodenhafer, who lives on our island. He was in the waiting room at our last meeting trying to make a comment, and due to some IT concerns, he wasn't able to get through, but he asked me to personally just convey that he supports our efforts to open the beach as soon as possible. So I promised him I would convey that during the public comment period. Thank you. That's all I've got.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. Okay, council, we've heard from public comment. I'm going to put my motion back up on the table. And Jim, if you'd like to put your second back up, and then we can discuss that and we'll move on.
I second the motion.
Thank you very much. Okay, discussion.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
I wonder if you would be so kind as to repeat your motion, or captured it correctly. You're recommending beaches and parking and Mound House, and I missed.
The other one was Bay Oaks.
Okay.
Mound
Thank
House,
you.
Bay Oaks, outside areas for recreation outside. And the beach is open, the parking open, and with I didn't put this in the motion, but following all CDC guidelines, and also strict enforcement of the social distancing requirements. We're going to continue to enforce that because, you know, there is still a pandemic going on. There are still people sick out there. We want to keep people apart from each other. The masks, I would say, would be a personal decision if someone wanted to wear their mask. But as long as we follow the guidelines of 6 feet apart and no groups larger than 10 people, and again, common sense being, you know, if it's a husband and wife or a couple of family members that are already in the house together, you know, we're not going to pull them apart from each other. But I sincerely am still concerned about the illnesses. I do feel that since the other beaches have opened, not just our beaches here on Fort Myers Beach, but all throughout the county and Collier County, that's taken some of the pressure off of us and has allowed us this opportunity now to move forward with opening up our beach. And I have every confidence in our citizenry that they'll follow these rules and not abuse the what's being made available. It can go back the other way, and this is not a threat on my part. This is an observation that California opened up their beaches, and the people came out and they abused the social distancing requirements, and the governor of California reclosed all the beaches in Orange County, the most popular beaches in Southern California. So it can be done. So with everyone's cooperation, we're going to try to get life back to normal here on Fort Myers Beach, but it does take cooperation. And I'm convinced that our people here on the beach will certainly cooperate. Okay, that's my little soapbox. Who else would like to discuss this motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
before we get into discussion, I just have a couple of questions for points of clarification. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in your motion, did you also want to conform Fort Myers Beach with the governor's phase 1 recommendations as well? Was that part of the motion, or is that a separate issue we're going to be discussing today?
I tell you what, why don't we just discuss that later on, Jim, if you don't mind.
That's fine. I just was trying to understand.
As far as businesses go and what have you, and
Yeah, restaurants, et cetera.
yes, I think we can handle that with another discussion, but
And that's fine. I just wanted to understand that because the city of Sanibel, just by way of an example, offered a motion to conform its ordinances with the governor's phase 1 recommendations, and they sort of addressed it in mass. And again, we can certainly do that separate from the beach to conversation. That's fine. I just wanted to be clear what we were talking about here.
okay, all right. I'm more than willing to discuss that as well, Jim. And
Okay.
Now, so as far as clarification again, so
Yes.
what we're really talking about here is amending the first emergency declaration parts E about beaches and F about parks and rec.
correct,
Okay,
correct.
because that kind of compartmentalizes things.
One more quick clarifying question, Mr. Mayor. Are you including Newton Park in your motion?
I didn't, but I guess we could. I mean,
Can I offer that as a small amendment to not only open the Newton Park, but also the restroom at Newton Park?
that's fine. I would,
Jim, are you including the parking at Newton Park? And my question was also going to be parking at beach accesses. I know that Sanibel has not opened their parking. They've opened their beaches, but not their parking.
Yeah, just again, point of clarification, having just listened to that 3-hour meeting, they never actually closed their beaches in Sanibel, but you're correct, Madam Vice Mayor, they extended for 2 weeks the closure of their public parking at beach access points. But that's a good question.
I'm willing to see how the council feels about that.
I think it would be a good idea to stay in step and sync with Sanibel on this.
As far as keeping the access parking closed.
The parking, access parking and the Newton Beach parking, we could open the park, but I would prefer to keep the parking closed for now.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
since the discussion is including opening the restroom, just be aware of that due to COVID-19, we will have to take extraordinary measures that we normally do not take to maintain that bathroom sanitized, if that is the council's ultimate decision.
Roger, that's, if I may, Mr. Mayor, that's a fair point. As you know, the county's opened their restaurants and they've taken extraordinary measures to try to address those legitimate concerns that our town manager just raised. I'm a little concerned if we open our beaches and we don't open that restroom on Newton Park. Newton Park's really kind of that critical midpoint of the island that a lot of folks are going to get stuck, and they may be using the wrong areas for relief, particularly those folks who live along the beach, and that Newton Park could help relieve some of that challenge.
Roger, do we have information from the county that they are taking extraordinary measures with the restrooms at their parks?
They are. They've gone as far, for example, to have staff people in PPE opening doors, pushing buttons for the public to avoid citizen contact followed by a subsequent citizen's contact. So to commend them, they have been put in place these extraordinary efforts. They've increased their staffing. They have used their staffing with PPE protection to press buttons and open doors and things like that to avoid person-to-person contact of those common surfaces.
Well, I suppose we could put this off until after the weekend and then bring this back again on Monday and talk about it again. But I don't know. Are you afraid of putting a staff member on that? Are you concerned about that, Roger?
Well, we would literally have to have 2 staff people there with PPE throughout the duration of whatever time limit the council sets for it to be open. I assume that would be from sunup to sunset. And clearly, people do catch us despite, having PPE.
Mhm.
But we will do that if that's what the council feels it's important to have those restrooms open and available to the public.
Well, it also kind of relates to the parking because the parking would increase demand because otherwise it's really just the beach access. But that, Newton Park has Newton Park parking and Strand View. So if people can come and park, there's going to be a lot more people using their facilities. I don't know if that would really affect staffing levels, but it would certainly affect demand.
I guess I'm just questioning that putting it off till Monday really, we wouldn't have any more information on Monday than we have today.
Well, then let's decide to.
But I guess my comment would be, it seems that if we would put adequate antibacterial wipes at the entrance to the restroom, everybody could take one, cover their hand with it to use it to open the door, because even once they get inside the restroom, they need to touch things to secure the door to their stall, etc. And we can't have a staff person going actually into the restroom with them. So it would seem to me that the better option would be to have these wipes available for people at the entrance. And unless I'm making some health mistake that I'm not aware of.
No, we discussed that internally, Vice Mayor, and that would rely on the good graces of our users to leave wipes behind for the next person, or for us to still have a physical presence there to make sure that resource doesn't get removed.
Another idea, do like what cruise ships do is you have the, the touchless hand sanitizer dispensers. Now, they're not good for wiping down surfaces, but allow people to easily sanitize their hands, and they're a little harder to go walking.
We could try that.
I saw that at the 7-Eleven this morning down by me. They have, they say, sanitize your hands on the way in, sanitize your hands on the way out. Seemed pretty reasonable. But anyhow, what's the will of the council here? Is there
Well, my feeling would be to open the restroom with the measures that we just discussed, but keep the parking closed.
I'm a little torn about the whole parking thing because, okay, right now, the county kind of forced our hand at this. They put parking, they put a lot of people in a fairly small area. My understanding is they were very diligent about, practicing these healthy behaviors, things like, having the people in PPE and doing all this until they left the county park. And then it was pretty much up to the town to deal with the people who were straggling off, gathering at takeaway restaurants, not practicing social distancing, this kind of thing. So if you open up the beach access parking, you're essentially allowing people to spread out along 7 miles of beach as opposed to just being concentrated in one place. The other hand, you're putting people in neighborhoods who aren't from the neighborhoods with potential contagion. So, honestly, I to me, it seems like it's kind of a moot point as far as health, whether or not you open the parking.
I agree.
I'm comfortable opening the parking. I understand the arguments against it, but I'm comfortable opening the parking as well for the reasons that Bill just cited, spreading out the crowds. If you look at our test run, the morning after we voted to open the beaches in part from 7 to 10, because of the beach access points, our residents naturally flowed into the beach in a way because they were coming through the beach access that naturally separated them. And by the way, I would just as a side note commend our residents. They were spectacular. I was out there for the first hour on the beach. I didn't see one violation of social distancing. I thought our residents did an awesome job. And so I trust them as we go forward. But I do agree with Bill that this would really help spread folks throughout the 7-mile stretch and could be a good public health benefit. And it would also keep us consistent with the county.
I agree.
My only response to that, and I can see both sides of this question. I'm not trying to be obstructionist, But our island has always been kind of a two-part island. There's the downtown district, and there are many residents who live further south in the island that rarely go downtown because they don't like the crowds in general. By opening up and spreading out and allowing people to come from everywhere and park all the way up and down the island, are people who normally use the less traveled, less crowded area of the island are now subject to these folks that are coming in from everywhere. So my thought in keeping the parking closed is, yes, people can come, they can walk up and down the beach, but we might preserve some sense of there's a part of the island that's a little more safe for our residents.
Mr. Chair,
I think that's a fair point. If we were still in season, I would absolutely agree. But the fact that we're coming into some of our slowest months, there are a lot of businesses mid-island and at the south end of the island that need some help as well. And if we could spread folks out and have a good public health argument for that, particularly as we go into this slow season, that could really mean life or death for some of these businesses who are just not just those on the north end, but throughout the island. Just a thought.
And I agree in helping the businesses. Santini has a huge parking lot that is not closed. I don't think that very many people park at our beach accesses and go to a business. So I don't see it as hurting them. But again, I appear to be in the minority, just saying out loud my reasons so you know my logic.
Okay, so we will, it sounds like the consensus is to open up the parking on the beach accesses and also to have the restroom opened up at Newton Park with measures taken to mitigate the.
Dan, do you have anything to add? We haven't heard from you.
yeah, I was just waiting. Mr. Chair, I have heard from several residents on the south end regarding the parking at the beach accesses. They're concerned that if we don't open them, that people will continue to park in their parking lots at their condos. Santini Plaza was mentioned. So I would be in favor of opening the parking as well, and as well as your motion.
Thank you very much. Okay, what up? Is there any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, is there any objection to the motion? The motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on.
Well-timed bell.
Yes, it was. Okay, I don't know where to go from here. I guess the next discussion is about the businesses and so forth. But you know, our hand has sort of been called already with what the governor has come out with in his plan. So there is a plan from the state's point of view, and to answer those folks who in public comment who were questioning about the short-term rentals, that of course is a function of the governor's office, and he has continued his ban on those. So we don't really have too much to say about that right now. But I'll open up the floor, and whoever wants to discuss these
Mr. Mayor?
situations. Yes.
I like to follow in, I think, a very excellent tradition that you're setting and begin the conversation by putting forth a motion.
Very good.
And I would move that we adopt the governor's phase 1 recommendations in mass and then proceed accordingly.
I will second that.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Now, is this going to include what Sanibel did, where they continue because they kept their parking closed, but they also kept their hotel thing closed until the 15th, which is what we had already earmarked this to be, allowing people to take reservations. So are you doing this suggesting that as of Monday, people can start taking reservations, or are we going to extend this, to the 15th, which you already have done?
That's an excellent question. And my motion,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Adderholt, might just jump in. The Sanibel had a section that dealt with supporting and adopting the governor's executive order. They had a specific section on that. and they had a separate section where they dealt with the lodging. So you may want to bifurcate the issue and deal with them separately.
Would you like to do that, Jim? Just make your first motion supporting the governor's.
Well, I'd love to hear some discussion, because if it helps us get a unanimous vote in support of the governor's phase to bifurcate it, I'd love to see a unanimous vote if we could, and then we could discuss the lodging issue separately. But if it's gonna be split anyways, then under this motion, logically, I mean, Roger makes a good point, the Sanibel did separate it, but under the motion, and Bill's question is a good one, the motion would say that hotels could begin taking reservations effective May 4th, which is when the governor's recommendations go into place, unless we separate this issue and bifurcate it, like Roger said. So I'm comfortable proceeding either way, whichever one gets us further along the road.
If I might, Bill?
No, go ahead, please.
If I might, supporting the governor's motion or the governor's phase-in does not tie our hands from doing those types of things. Specifically, it provides that localities can do certain specific things that might not completely line up with his plan that are pertinent to our community. So I think supporting his plan does not say that we can't go ahead with the May 15th if that's what we decide to do. So I'd feel comfortable voting for the motion supporting the phase 1 plan.
My problem is that my support of the phase 1 motion, even though I think, like you said, it's kind of window dressing because, is that my support may hinge on whether or not we extend this, the hotels until the 15th or not.
Well, I can say I'm in favor of keeping that in place because I'd like to stay in sync with Sanibel. I'm disappointed that we didn't do that earlier.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I would amend my motion to bifurcate that issue and separate the lodging issue from the support of the phase 1 recommendation.
Very good, Jim. Thank you. And the seconder?
I will amend my second.
Okay.
And so we're going to address these. These are really two motions.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, two separate. I haven't made the second motion on the lodging, but this is just clarifying the phase 1 motion.
Yeah, the first one is in support of the governor's phased in action. Okay, so.
My only really reservation here again is that I would like to have the date set before we adopt the governor's resolution, just so we are not getting ourselves into procedural issue where if we get one and we don't get the other, then we are by default getting the sooner opening. And I'm just not sure we're ready for that.
Yeah, I think the importance, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I think the importance of adopting the phase 1 resolution, aside from the lodging issue, which is a fair and potentially separate discussion, is we need to give some certainty to our restaurant and retail businesses so they can plan. If they're gonna abide by the governor's phase 1 opening and have a 25% indoor capacity and have a social distancing 6-foot outdoor capacity, and for retail 25% indoor capacity, they've got to talk to their suppliers, they've got to order things, they've got to get plans, they need to have some certainty. And I don't think there's a lot of disagreement on this anyways, but I think providing them some certainty from the council will really allow them to plan ahead and then proceed accordingly in a sort of a measured and thoughtful way.
Fine with that. I'm fine with that. Okay, is there any further discussion on the amended motion? Any objection? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously 5-0. Okay, now the second part of that, Jim, did you want to address that as well?
Well, we may have a bit of a disagreement on this. I'm comfortable with the present course of the phase 1 recommendations from the governor. The governor has chosen, for whatever reason, to not include short-term rentals, but he's never actually prohibited hotels. He's deemed hotels essential. I'm comfortable allowing the hotels to open as part of the phase one, a recommendation May 4th. Others may not, but so I guess I think might be better for someone else. Well, let me just say this to make it easy. I'll make a motion that we include lodging is consistent with the governor's phase one recommendation.
Is there a second to Councilman Adderhall's?
I will second.
That's Dan Aller's second. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Okay, so you are in fact now saying that you would want instead of the day we agreed about earlier on the 15th, that you would move the hotel openings up to Monday the 4th.
That would be consistent with the motion. Yes, Bill.
Okay. You know, I have a few issues with that. I think that and basically some of this is actually based on what I've got from public comment and some of the things that people say. I don't think that we really have a plan, and I know I've been asking for a plan how to safely open since we first got on council. I know that I did get the document from the mayor's group and another one that was from the Florida Food and Lodging Association that have a lot of good ideas. They're all recommendations. But when you hear comments, people say that, you know, yeah, social distancing is really great at our condo, except around the pool, or people talking about going back to normal. That to me implies that these people aren't really taking social distancing seriously. You know, I'll give it to the governor. The governor had I thought, a very good speech, presentation. He had a lot of data. It was a little skewed. It was compared the state to the worst states. But I also get a lot of chatter, and this is not just in hotels, but from some business people who are downplaying this virus, calling it just the flu and it's not a threat. And to me, that undermines the confidence that I personally have that these businesses are looking after the health of their, are going to look after the health of their customers and their workers. I also had some conversations with some business owners who say that a lot of their workers are elderly and considered to be at risk, which that makes it more important that we ensure that social distancing is being practiced and we have a plan in place. I haven't heard much, you know, we're putting no more conditions on this than you open up. So we're putting nothing in there about social distancing requirements outside of what the governor said. And in his presentation, he said that people should wear masks so they can't properly social distance, and that would include servers. But I didn't see that in the executive order itself. So I'm concerned that opening quickly without any kind of plan for social distancing is honestly a bit reckless, because we have 50 or 60 different restaurants on the island. We have a dozen hotels, you know, more B&Bs. Out of those, there are some people who will practice social distancing, will take this serious. There's others that never have. And that gives me some concern.
I share your concerns very much.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I just want to make a comment about the vacation rentals. As you guys are probably well aware, we've been getting a lot of comments and emails and stuff from short-term vacation rentals that don't feel it's fair. They need to understand that we don't have, the governor has essentially taken the authority of that. And if, I know they're extremely worried about this phase one, but I urge them to look forward to what the requirements are in phase two. In phase two, they are allowed to start taking rentals, but only to Florida residents, and there has to be a 72-hour window between stays. So if this is a big concern of them, which I've heard it is, they should start sending their letters to the governor.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have to agree with Bill's comments, but I also have something to add. Again, Sanibel is at the 15th. I don't know that they were following us, but I have to believe that that was on their mind. If we now pull back to the 4th, the Sanibel hotels are going to say, look, the Fort Myers Beach Council is giving their hotels a jump on us. It's unfair competition. it would seem to make sense that we stay in line with where we were. To me, it looks like we're trying to pull something. And I don't feel comfortable with that. We were both at the 15th.
And there's the 5 o'clock from Albuquerque.
I keep mentioning Sanibel, and no one was responding to me that we should be, staying in sync with them in some way. I don't know if everybody's against that.
I'm not against that. I'm not against that at all. I think that's probably pretty sound advice, really. I think originally most of the hoteliers were more concerned about getting ready for the Memorial Day weekend. And that gives them plenty of time. The 15th gives them plenty of time to do that. It also gives them time right now to begin gearing up and everything else and preparing not that they haven't been, I'm sure that they have been already, but to get their hotels in order and ready to go. So I can live with that, Vice Mayor. I don't have a problem with that. And I think that's a reasonable compromise.
And I would respond to Rexanne that the only deviation I see, and I'm kind of still not absolutely convinced, is with our parking, and we're just a different situation in Sanibel. Sanibel has their central business district is quite a ways away from the beach, and almost all the parking is either at condos on a licensing thing or public. With us, we have a lot of private parking that is concentrated in a couple areas of the island, which gives a different effect on social distancing than it does in Sanibel. It concentrates our people in one part of the island. And that's why I think that we have more of a benefit opening the parking than Sanibel would. So that's the only place I really want to deviate from, or would consider deviating from Sanibel's timeline, was the parking.
Very good.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just
Yes, sir.
one additional point. I read the mayor's task force recommendations, and I thought the presentation from both the restaurant, retail, and hotel industry was excellent. And I think these folks have really thought this out. They're very well prepared. They're highly trained professionals. And I was really impressed with the plan of the best practices that was put forth and shared with the council. And I think our hotels are ready. I understand the reticence. I respect my colleagues' concerns, and certainly if that's the will of the council, I'll support that. But I do think that the hotels have demonstrated their readiness through the task force recommendations, which I thought were quite specific and extremely professional. So, but having said that, obviously I'll support the will of the council.
Any other discussion? Roger, do you have any opinions on this? Any information that you want to put forward, Mr. Town Manager?
Well, I think that this is a decision. I think we have had an interesting 72 hours due to the fact that one group may have jumped out ahead of another. So there's a lot to be said to try to stay on the same page. I think the words you used, Mr. Mayor, with our sister cities, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Anyway, it's really council policy and what you think is best for the community. So most of you have, in fact, all of you, I think with few exceptions, have lived here longer than I have, understand the business community better than perhaps I do, and I think the decision's in good hands.
I guess I would have a comment to direct back to Jim. If I'm looking at the right report and the same report that you refer to, I didn't find anything in particular as recommendations from our local businesses. They cite us to their national associations, and then they ask that their businesses take a pledge to follow those practices, but the public is not going to know who is and who isn't following those practices unless they publicize it somehow. So I The practices that they indicate are excellent practices, but the public has no idea which businesses are going to be following those practices.
Well, it was the recommendation of the group that they make those known publicly, so that the people out there would in fact know which hotels were practicing these, putting these recommendations into practice.
I didn't see that in the report, Mr. Murphy.
Well, it was, I don't know if it's in there or not, to be honest with you. I don't have it in front of me, but I do know that it was very well, it was discussed quite extensively, and that it was the consensus of the group was that that's just good business among those people to put that word out about what they're doing in order to attract these people back to their properties, that they were going to get that word out themselves. And I have to rely on them that they're in fact will do that. And I don't know why they wouldn't. So, but anyhow, anything else, Bill?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, I don't think in the government's recommendations was there any kind of capacity limits on hotels? I don't believe there was. So are we saying that we would let people go to 100% capacity immediately?
You know, it was sort of there were the recommendations of all the hotel groups and so forth, that they wouldn't do that they would space out the rooms and so forth. And I don't think there was any indication at all that they would go back to 100%. And frankly, as a practical matter, I doubt very much that that would happen right now. But I'm not a hotelier either, so. But anyhow.
Well, you know, like, and again, when my conversations with some people, I mean, I've talked to some people who had small inns and had, you know, retail shops, and they are not going to open on the 15th. I mean, they're going to wait and see. Because they really want to see what happens, and they're taking their health pretty seriously on this. But I mean, opening up, I mean, we just follow the governor's recommendations, and it's all of Florida is different. I mean, hotels are considered essential where they're needed for, you know, traveling people who are on essential business, et cetera, et cetera. Here we're a little different. It's more just essential for the livelihood of the town's businesses and whatnot. But I think that, you know, some restrictions I think would be valuable, because again, and I know that that Councilman Adderholt made a comment before that, you know, you shouldn't form public policy based on the outliers or the knuckleheads, as you said. But in my mind, a lot of these ordinances are specifically for those people, because I agree with you, Ray. I've talked to some of the bigger hotel owners. They are consummate businessmen. They will take precautions. They already have. They will post things, and they will also make it overt, because they know it's good optics to show that they're looking after the health of people. There are other people, and if there's a wide variety of people on this island that own large and small hotels, it will not be so cautious. There are people that honestly may in normal circumstances be cautious, but are in dire financial straits, and that may cause them to cut some corners and do some things that they probably shouldn't do. And as you pointed out, a tourist comes onto the island, they go to a restaurant, they go to a hotel, they really, especially if they book in advance, they probably are not going to know what standards that hotel is being kept to, or what standards that restaurant is. What my preference would be is to keep this in line with Sanibel, move it to the 15th, and then when we have our management and planning next Thursday, is to discuss this as far as guidelines. Another thing is, okay, if we do come up with a limitation, and really you're probably talking about the holiday weekend coming up, because we're probably going to be into June before really the density gets up, if the summer even really happens, because the whole world has been suffering from this. We can also circle back about the talk about vacation rentals, because vacation rentals are a different bird. You may be able to have 50% occupancy for a large hotel, say, and still have problems around the pool. Like someone said, you know, we social distance except around the pool. Vacation rentals are a different thing. A lot of them are small apartments. Some of them are 6, 7, 8 bedroom houses, which I have rented for my family, and they are a blast. But this is not social distancing. This is people coming from family coming from different places, being together a lot. And I think that if we adopt a capacity limitation for hotels, then to correspond with that, the vacation rental should have a similar regulation saying that they can't rent more than, say, 2 bedrooms per dwelling, just to limit the big party house kind of phenomena that can happen at these large vacation rentals. And I'm concerned that, if we need to put this in some kind of ordinance, that we should do it as part of this, and not try to bifurcate these into different ordinances and then have it fall short in the second part of it.
Mr. Mayor.
It appears from my screen that we have lost the mayor. So I think it would be appropriate at this point to call a brief recess and see if we can get him back online with us. So if IT staff could call Mr. Murphy.
We'll call it right now.
And I'm gonna call a recess until 10:15, and hopefully he'll be back online by then.
And Ms. Vice Mayor,
Yes.
I have been told that there are 3 people in the waiting room that want to make public comment. If we could consider that when we reconvene.
Let's both of us remember, you remind me or I'll remind you to let Mayor Murphy know that. We are in recess.
All right, I'm back on to whom it may concern. Ah, boy. Well, obviously they don't all know what they want. Sorry for the technical difficulties, gang. Must have been that airplane, that low-flying airplane that threw me out of whack over here.
Mayor, we're in recess.
Yes, I know. So I should be quiet then.
No, I wasn't sure that you were aware.
You can be heard on TV though.
Mayor Murphy,
Yes.
just before we called a recess, I was told that there are 3 people in the waiting room that wanted to make public comment. Chuck Bodenhafer, Chris Primo, and a phone number.
You know, we had public comment already. Were they waiting in there at the time prior to?
Yes, sir, that's what I'm told.
Okay. Well, if they were there at the proper time and they want to be heard, why, that's fine. You know, we'll have to work it in some point here.
Okay,
We're right in the middle of a discussion right now, so I mean.
I understand.
Yeah. I thought Mr. Bodenhofer's statement was read by Councilman Adderholt.
Those were his comments for the last meeting, I think, not necessarily this meeting.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. As soon as Jim gets back, well, we're till 10:15, aren't we? Okay.
I'm not sure why I'm mirror imaged.
Mayor Murphy,
Yes.
I think we are past the time we've called to be back in session.
Is
If you're
Councilman Adderholt there?
Yes, I see him.
Oh, I didn't see him up on mine. Okay. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. Apologize for the delay there. Okay, where were we in the discussion before I was so rudely interrupted?
We had Jim's, we're discussing Jim's.
Mr. Mayor. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
I just a couple quick things. Number one, I'm a pretty good vote counter, and I kind of see where this is headed. A and B, I'm really pleased with how we have moved forward together today. We've made a lot of progress, and I would therefore I would respectfully withdraw my motion, and just ask that this item be placed on our M&P agenda for next week, so we can discuss it further and really begin to get some direction on this.
Okay.
Mayor, I would like to make a motion, because without a motion, with what we do, we will open up by default on Monday.
Okay, go right ahead. Go right ahead, Bill.
I'm not sure that's the case. We have a restriction in place that is greater than the governor's order. John, the governor's order doesn't automatically change that, does it?
No, it doesn't. In fact, to the extent that the governor's order has language in there about its effective date, both with respect to short-term rentals as well as to the issue of hotel rentals, he very clearly said this order is effective to this date unless extended. Again, we're somewhat in a situation, I believe, that we're waiting for the governor to give us some guidance on the next steps. And until we see what the next order is and what it addresses, we're somewhat blind. And therefore, I think you all thinking ahead, no pun intended, said, hey, let's put this out to the 15th as it relates to accepting reservations for hotels and others. But that's how I've read this order to say is that hotels, except for essential service providers, are still closed. Short-term rentals are still closed, and he's very specifically said unless until such date or otherwise extended.
So you think we're safe not to have a motion to reinstate, as it were, the 15th date? That still is good. Just a simple yes or no would be helpful.
Yes, you're good.
Thank
Now,
you.
did that
And
change?
John,
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm just curious now, did that change at all since we adopted the resolution that the governor's
No, because the governor's order says with respect to short-term rentals, that prohibition is still in place. He also says that to the extent, unless otherwise modified, executive order, I think it's 20-91, is still in effect. And the short-term rental one is a separate order. I think it's 2087 or 85. He specifically refers to it in his most recent order. and he very specifically references 20-91 as well, and says, unless otherwise modified, these other orders remain in place and in force and effect until either modified or extended.
So John, to clarify, what we have put in place of the 15th, if we keep it the way it is, knowing what the governor has said, can hotels and short-term rentals take reservations as of the 15th unless something were to change from the governor's orders?
Yes.
Thank you.
And no further action is needed.
Right. Okay. Just to further clarify that, John, just to illustrate Dan's point, is that on the 15th, should the governor not opine on short-term rentals, those folks who make reservations past the 15th would then have to cancel them, but hotels would not. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, everybody have clarity?
Yeah, so I'm okay with what Jim suggests. We can put this on the M&P and thrash it out openly and come up with a good plan.
Very good. Very good. Okay, what's next?
Mr. Mayor, just a couple of housekeeping measures. During the break, had a couple, I think, good questions texted to me. Number one, was your motion opening the beach and putting
It was tomorrow.
Effective tomorrow?
Yes, tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then second of all, I also had a question. Did your motion include the Bay Oaks pool? I don't think it did, but I just thought I'd get clarification.
It did not.
Okay, thank you.
It did not. Thank you for clarifying that, but it did not.
And one point that I've had a lot of questions too coming, I'm sure you all have, about timeshares. And, we have a complex puzzle here. So we're in the discussion on hotels, we should probably discuss timeshares too.
I agree.
Yep, that sounds good.
My understanding is that timeshare owners are owners, and we are not prohibiting owners from being in their own property. However, if a timeshare person rents or exchanges their unit, then those people would be prohibited because they are not owners.
Yes, my understanding of the discussion that you had at the previous council is that you defined the timeshare users and owners as transient visitors, and the idea was to not have the transient visitors. That was that's what I recall from your discussions.
Well, let's talk about it. What do you think, town attorney? Where do we stand on this issue with the timeshare?
The concept, as I understand it, and the direction we were given as reflected in the orders, is that anything short of a 30-day stay is inconsistent with the governor's stay-at-home order and therefore prohibited, irrespective of the form of ownership in that regard. Timeshares, because we did specifically include timeshares in the order, and that really was the directive. It's was a merger of the prohibition on short-term rentals and the safer at home order, where the governor determined that travel, non-essential travel, was discouraged and prohibited, and that hotels and motels and other transit uses were only allowed for the purpose of providing lodging for essential service providers.
Wow. That really, I don't know how we can prohibit an owner, someone who owns the timeshare. It's a property ownership right. I think
there are a whole series of, as you all see from the comments that you have received and have public comments, there are a wide array of views on the level of authority that the governor, that local governments have. Some people assert that you're infringing on their civil rights, but form of ownership is not determinative of the rights of government to impose restrictions in times of emergency. If you all want to, let me finish. If you want to exclude or say timeshares can be occupied irrespective of length of stay, tell us now and we'll make that clear in the order.
I would be in favor of that. I think if we're opening businesses and restaurants, we've got a lot of transient people going up and down the island. I would be in favor of making it clear that owners are allowed to inhabit their own property, that they can't exchange it or rent it to someone else, but the owner is allowed to be there.
That wouldn't bother me at all, except that if your intent is to keep the transients out, how in God's name would that be enforced?
Well, okay, looking at it, one problem, just as far as social distancing problem, and it sounds like with most of these, multi-unit places, that pools tend to be the big congregation point. You can go to a hotel and say, 50% occupancy to limit people in common areas, which is probably easier than chasing people out of the pool. But with timeshares, people have these slots for years. So they are less likely probably to not come. And I see some social distancing challenges from the nature of them, being determined to come and from them being transient, coming from somewhere else, and potentially bringing, illness with them. So there are challenges to it. Another thing, talk about ownership and whether you're allowed to limit that. We essentially did that. We told people who, condos and houses that live on the beach that they can't use their beach.
Right.
The other thing I'd like to add to this is if you own a timeshare, you can only come at a certain time of the year. So you had a certain week or 2 weeks or a month that you're allowed to use it. And if that date passes for these folks, and they've paid for all year and never gotten to come, I think it's a real problem if we prohibit the owners. I understand it's an enforceability thing, but we lack enforceability on most of the things we've done today. So I stand where I was as far as owners need to be allowed to come to their own timeshare during their time.
How does the rest of the group feel about that?
Well, Mr. Mayor, maybe I need a little clarification on timeshare. Madam Vice Mayor, are you speaking of the person that bought that week or that actually owns the unit that is in the timeshare program? I'm not 100% sure of what the timeshare rules or regulations.
When I say owner, I'm talking about they own it in time units. That's why it's called a timeshare. The unit is not owned by anyone all year round. It's managed by someone year round, but the owners own it in time units. It's like a shared ownership.
So how does that differ from, say, like the Pink Shell, where there's an owner of the unit, but then the Pink Shell manages it?
That is a timeshare, what you're referring to there.
So wouldn't they all technically be considered transient then?
Not if you're an owner. If I owned the first 2 weeks in June and then rented them that 2 weeks to someone else to come, then it would be a rental. But the 2 weeks that I own that unit during those 2 weeks.
If I may, I think that the council is discussing two separate, very similar concepts. The idea of condo hotel, which I believe the Pink Shell may be that form of operation, versus timeshare, which is fractional ownership. They are similar in that someone may own a condo hotel unit outright and have the right of use during 2 or 3 weeks out of the year, or however their documents specify. But other than that, they're required as part of their ownership to put that unit into a rental pool. Timeshares can also do something similar, but their ownership is by week or by month, depending upon the document documents that govern that timeshare operation.
Well, here's something else to consider with the timeshares. The day you say it's okay to open up timeshares, they're 100% occupied, that building. Not just one building, but however many there are. Because those weeks, they don't have to go out and try to rent those weeks. They're already bought and paid for, and those people, assuming they can get down here, the building will be 100% occupied. So that's the other side of the coin. Just a little food for thought. So
the difference is, you know, a short-term rental, you can get your money back under many circumstances if you can't come. These folks are out their money.
no, I understand, and it's
So
these are
would be the
difficult
people
times.
that we are hurting the most.
Oh, believe me, Vice Mayor, I've heard from all of them too. I've heard from plenty of them. So I understand what they're going through. So I'm willing to discuss this with everybody and see where we stand. I mean, according to our town attorney, we're on sound legal standing where we are here under these emergency declarations to continue a prohibition on these timeshare units. Am I correct there, John? We're okay. I mean,
until a gentleman in a black robe tells us differently, yes, you're okay.
okay. Well, I was hoping for something a little stronger than that.
No, I believe 100% that you all have the right to do what you have done so far and what you're planning to do moving forward. The state statute gives you a wide discretion to adopt emergency rules and regulations such as that you've been discussing over the last several weeks, including this one. If in the order that is in place today, I have approved, I drafted it, and I stand behind it.
Very good.
And I agree with John, but the point I'm making is that we at this point with the governor's phase-in have decided apparently as a state or most of a state that because the situation is improved, we are pulling back in those areas where we have infringed on people's constitutional rights. I agree we had the right to infringe during an emergency, but we're now saying the emergency is a lot better, so we're pulling back on infringing on those rights. And when you've got the word owner involved, I think that's an important consideration.
Mayor Murphy?
Yes, sir.
And I understand what you're saying, Rexanne, but you know, I mean, and I understand there's financial pain. These people really look forward to coming down. They have paid for this, but then you have people who own vacation rentals who are feeling probably much greater pain because they can't get any income from these houses that they depend on. We are pulling back, but one of the real difficult things about trying to do a phased withdrawal from these measures is that you put yourself in the situation of picking winners and losers, and if you're not careful. And so if you say that, you know, well, it's not us as a governor, the vacation rentals can't go forward, but we're going to let timeshare people in, we are picking winners and losers. And I'm just not comfortable with that. Plus, I really do agree the emails that I got from some people, and I don't know what the exposure is for timeshares. I understand there's a few units. I think one was Island Park or something that a lot of emails came from. So I assume that a lot of that condo is timeshare, if not all. So these people are adamant that they need to come down when their week is, which, like Mr. Murphy said, means that occupancy rates are going to go from nothing to fairly high very quickly. And the common areas of those condos are going to be full of people who are from all different parts of the country with all kinds of different levels of potential contagion. So that gives me some heartburn with opening up the timeshares, even though I really do sympathize with the people who are looking forward to coming down and have been doing it for years.
And I agree with that. You know, far be it for me to tell people how to use their property, but these are extraordinary times. And I agree that because of the governor's order, we are forced to pick quote unquote winners and losers. And I'm sorry that's the way it is, but I'm agreeing with Bill on this. And how about the other members? Do we have any opinions from, or is there a motion from anyone thus far, or are we still discussing this? Or Bill, you leaned in. Were you going to do something there?
No, I appreciate your procedure to have a motion, then have a discussion. But sometimes I think it's good to have a discussion, but so we know what it is we're talking about.
Well, okay, and we have been discussing, but is there any, Dan Allers or Jim Adderholt, did you want to weigh in on this at all?
Just Mr. Chair, I think by following the governor's orders, because we all know that there's no necessary end date to it, that could change tomorrow, that could change in 2 weeks. So I think following the 1st or the 4th or the 15th, it could change depending on what he does. So I don't see any issue with keeping it the way it is. And if things change, we can always deal with it as it comes up.
Dan,
Well,
I'm sorry, Dan, I don't think you, and I could have this wrong, but my understanding is that Mr. Heron is indicating that we as a council segregated out this group in a prior order. So this is something we would need to pull back on. The state order isn't going to change it. Am I right, John? We did this.
That is correct. And it's in your agenda packet. And I'm paraphrasing. This prohibition does not affect the ability of an owner of a condominium, single family, or multi-unit property from staying in his or her own property for some or all of the restricted period, excluding timeshares, nor any lodging of first responders or employees. And that was slightly modified in subsequent order, but that's the gist of the current restriction on timeshares in general. Certainly they're prohibited. Timeshares are like other, like hotels and short-term rentals, excuse me, to the extent that they're renting units and akin to or similar to a hotel for occupancy, that is prohibited.
So legally, you're saying that we have the right to do this?
Yes. If you want to give timeshare occupants the ability to occupy their units during their 1 week interval ownership, direct me to do so and we'll modify the order.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I see it from both sides. I'll follow the will of the council on this. I can see it both ways. I agree with Rexanne and I agree with Bill. It's difficult for me to tell an owner that they can't use their space, but I understand that the 100% occupancy if you do open it back up. So it's a tough decision. I hate to tell an owner that they can't use their space.
Councilman Adderholt, you want to weigh in on this one?
You know, it's been a great discussion and I'm learning a great deal. I until we have a specific motion, I don't have a specific opinion. I'm thinking through this as we talk and I'm learning a lot. It's been a good discussion.
Very good.
Okay, then I'm going to make a motion so that we can actually take a vote on this. Dan, I'm sorry that you want to follow the will of the council, but you may end up being the swing vote on this. I'm going to make a motion that we modify our previous restriction and allow timeshare owners to occupy their units. Is that a sufficient statement, John?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Very good. It's been moved and seconded. Now we'll discuss again.
Do you have an effective date in mind, Roxanne?
I didn't.
So that would be immediately then?
That would be immediately, I guess. They're owners. We're now telling owners they're allowed to go in their backyards on the beach we're saying restaurant owners can open their restaurants, that businesses, we're allowing owners to do things to a wide degree. So yeah, I guess I would say effective immediately.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other questions there, Bill?
Well, it's kind of a splitting hair thing. I understand in concept that they're owners, but they are not the only owners. There are potentially 52 owners of a unit. As far as the health, and one thing we don't seem to talk about enough here, I think, in the council is the health ramifications. We are not done with this by any means. Opening up is a difficult thing. When we open up, when big hotels and things open up, they are managed directly. They have people there that will monitor social distancing, hopefully, and do certain hygiene. When you're in a condo and you have a lot of people there that are from somewhere else, that have just been on airplanes, that have just been in different locations with different levels of contagion, I think that we are really exposing a lot of risk to our residents and to the other people in those condos. I'm not in favor of potentially opening up a petri dish in some places where timeshares are concentrated.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor, if we're going to actually vote on this, I'm trying to be, these are really strange times and it's very difficult to be intellectually consistent. I guess since we've already advocated, since the governor's allowed the hotels to open and function under some restrictions, and I was supportive of that, even though it didn't pass, and that's fine, I respect that. And the governor's not allowed short-term rentals to proceed at this time. If I'm going to be consistent, if the governor allows what Rexanne is proposing, in order to be consistent, I'm supportive of her motion.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the Vice Mayor's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, no, that wasn't my aye. Roxanne said aye, and Jim said aye.
Yes.
Any other ayes? The motion fails. Is there an alternative motion to that?
I don't know how you can split the hair any finer.
Well, I don't know either, Roxanne, but I was putting it out there just in case. But I'm sorry.
I think it's something good we can talk about in management and planning, because they're I guess the only other tool we can really have, because you can't like partially open a timeshare. You can't tell one owner they can have their place and another they can, is to maybe look at some effective dates.
Well, I disagree with you, Bill, because by saying that it was owners only, they wouldn't be able to rent the unit. So we would be keeping some people out, the people that didn't have a right to be there. So I felt like I was limiting it in some fashion by saying only owners could occupy. It wasn't a rental.
And the only thing I would add to that, respectfully, Vice Mayor, is I don't know how in God's name that would be enforced. So that's my only comment. But I would suggest that we don't always have to reinvent the wheel. If we could research Mr. Town Attorney, or anyone else for that matter, what other towns are doing, municipalities and so forth, in regards to timeshare, I'd be interested in hearing how other people have addressed this issue, and I'm open to suggestions, of course. Okay, what's next on the agenda for the group? What do you want? What would you like to discuss next? Anyone? Have we covered it all today?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
A bit of a non sequitur, but I wonder if I might request at the next M&P meeting that we also ask the town manager to give us, particularly for us newer members, a presentation on all the outstanding projects that the town is focused on, to give us a cost estimate, as well as a sort of an analysis on where that funding will come from, and just so we could begin to get a broader sense of the challenges in front of us and opportunities, and then be able to sort of prioritize, particularly as we are wrestling with this crisis as well, so we could kind of get an aggregate perspective and then begin to prioritize all the challenges and again opportunities that we face as a town. Might be helpful.
I think that's a great request. I'm sure the staff doesn't want to start compiling that, but I think that's a great request, and I think we should. We of course we should all know where we are right now and what we have to do to prepare for the near and distant future here. Thank you for that, Jim. Anyone else care to add anything?
I guess I've had a request from somebody who lives in the town to please let the people know that are watching us and following us. She indicated that it didn't seem we were relying on a lot of health or medical information. And I'd like to let people know that Roger sends us daily multiple emails from multiple sources. I literally spent more than 8 hours yesterday reading different reports and different websites from federal, state, local, etc. We are getting inundated with information. In fact, it's difficult for us to even sort through all what we are getting. But I assure you that we are getting a ton of information, and we are all spending a great deal of time trying to digest it.
Amen to that.
Mr. Mayor, if I could also give an amen to that too. One of our motions today endorsing the governor's phase 1 proposal was premised on, if folks watched the governor's speech or read his speech, the first segment it was focused on health data, outcomes, predictions, plans, etc. So again, with respect to what the vice mayor said, I mean, we're watching all the press conferences from the Corona Task Force federally. We're watching the state's messaging. We're watching all the information that Roger sends out, and it's definitely informing us as we move forward.
Thank you. And I would just reiterate that I rely on the opinions of the health professionals. I've said that all the way along, and I still do. And that being said, I realize that we're still in this health crisis, and maybe some opinions are that it's not so prevalent here in Lee County, but it is in other areas and could easily come back here. So with that being said, I'm going to remind everyone, I've been criticized this week heavily for not recalling the council a few hours after Monday's meeting to reverse the decision that we made. Now, I trust my council, and I think I have a pretty good idea of where they stand on issues. And I doubt very much, had I called them back in a couple of hours, that they would have changed their minds. And to that, I give them credit. I give them credit. But I will tell everyone that in my power, per the charter, to call an emergency meeting, myself or the town manager if he has 3 other members that care to call an emergency meeting, I will not hesitate. I will not hesitate to call an emergency meeting if the reports come back in that the social distancing guidelines are being abused on Fort Myers Beach. There'll be no hesitation on my part to call an emergency meeting of the town council to address that issue. We take this virus very seriously, and it's with great trepidation today that I am agreeing with the majority to reopen the beaches here. I think it's the right thing to do, but there are also grave concerns of mine that I have in doing this. So with that being said, I will cease my comments, and if anyone else wants to add anything, that Bill Veach, go right ahead.
Yeah, just one thing I want to reiterate to what you said. I think that, giving us a chance to hear from and I agree with Jim, the very informative presentation by the governor. seeing what Sanibel did, seeing what the county did, and coming through and actually making decisions from a position of having the knowledge of all these events that happened. I think that was beneficial, and I think it really showed in the way this meeting was presented. The other thing I want to say is that for anybody out there who's listening, I know a lot of people are watching these because of the gravity of this situation, is that the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association has some excellent, well thought out guidelines by medical people and by people in the industry. It's an easy document. Every one of your counselors has this, and the town has this. If you want it, just email us and we will forward it to you. And it makes some excellent guidelines and has some really good, easy to implement ideas that will help keep your customers and your employees safe. And I highly encourage anybody in the industry to get this document and look through it.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. I have one more comment that I'd like to make before we end up today. I'm throwing this out there to my fellow members. In light of the fact that we're beginning to open up here gradually and so forth, and promoting the social distancing, etc., I would like to ask my fellow members if we can return to our council chambers in town hall and resume our meetings there. Not that this hasn't been a great ball of fun for me here doing this Zoom business, but I think we're at the stage now where we could distance ourselves in the room. I think if I was in the middle and had a member on each end, and maybe a member in Roger's seat and a member in Michelle's seat, and have our 3 staff members out in front spread out somehow, that we could probably accomplish this and kind of get back at home and feel more at home, and also conduct these meetings a little easier without me having to grab dogs all morning. But I would also think that this can be accomplished, and if there, I'm open to listen to my fellow members and see how they feel about this.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Vice Mayor. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that I had already discussed this with Roger, who pointed out to me that that kind of action is in phase 2 of the governor's plan. So I would
that's specifically noted in phase 2 as to how municipalities can conduct their meetings and so forth.
They lifted the orders about in-person quorums, and that lifting of that order requiring in-person quorums will potentially go back into place as part of phase 2. So it seems like that's when they're anticipating. We could always go earlier. I can say, I also understand from speaking with Roger that we can't use Zoom and the town council chambers together very effectively because of feedback and other sound issues. So if there were those of us who were not yet ready to come back, it might cause an issue. I know that I'm kind of a second-tier person to take care of some folks who are immune compromised. So I'm trying to stay out of the public as long as I can in case I have to step in as a backup caretaker.
Okay, that's one opinion. How does everybody else feel? Yes, sir.
I obviously want to be sensitive to the Vice Mayor's needs, but at the same time, I strongly support what you're suggesting. Roger, could you opine on that? Is there a way to address Rexanne's concerns and still get us back together? Obviously, the county commissioners meet together and others are meeting, and I think it sends an important message to the community. Plus, it allows a certain comity amongst our group that I think could be helpful, and it would alleviate a lot of communication challenges. So I would strongly support that, but I would also be respectful of those like the Vice Mayor who may have unique needs, and I respect that as well.
I'd also like to get you back in the chambers there, Councilman Allers and Veach, and give you a proper swearing in.
Just for the record, I am down here at Town Hall now in an office just because the internet is so much better down here, so I wouldn't be interrupted. So I want to be respectful of that. Might be something you might want to try, Mr. Mayor. It's much better down here. Plus, you have IT adult supervision that's very helpful. It's certainly been helpful to me. But again, Roger, could you opine on this? Is there a way for us to do that and still respect Rexanne's needs?
Well, as she stated, there are some issues of trying to do it in person and doing Zoom at the same time. The original sound system, unfortunately, our large Bose speakers are hardwired in a way that, as some of the older council members know, create feedback under certain circumstances. Oh, we can explore if we can figure out a workaround for that situation in the event all 5 councilors do not want to come to town council and do it in person. But as I sit here today, I don't have that solution in hand, but we'll begin working on it. And I will see if we can figure out a way to accommodate one or more councils who feel safer at home.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I support your idea of getting back in the chamber. I'd just like to hear from John. I also understand that it was in there about the quorum coming into phase 2. Could you enlighten us a little bit on that, John?
Sure. Under phase 2, as I read the order, it will require us to essentially return to the chambers because the authority to meet and to achieve a quorum virtually will be rescinded. So there will have to be at least 3 council members in chambers. What would happen, I think, in such a situation is we'd revert back to how it's always been done. It will be streamed. We wouldn't necessarily be using Zoom because Zoom is a platform for replacement virtual meetings. We'd have a standard meeting, and to the extent that the 2 commissioners elect not to come to the chambers, assuming we have the physical quorum, they could appear just by phone, not necessarily by Zoom.
There you go.
Are there other maybe safety mitigation things we can do? I know public comment can be particularly problematical. Just bringing, because bringing people that are not essential into the chambers. The other thing is maybe can we look at some testing so the people who are going to be in the chambers are tested, and that way we can have more comfort that we won't be infectious to each other.
Well, I suppose we could do that.
As far as I can, to respond to that, Mr. Mayor and Councilman, as best I can tell, with the asymptomatic symptoms that people can typically have, I don't know that, I think testing, you would catch someone who has it, but you wouldn't necessarily catch someone who is asymptomatic in terms of what tests that the town could sort of do at the door. So, in terms of logistics, we can't have more than 10 people theoretically. That means we have, if we have more, a couple of speakers, we have a queue, or we have to try to figure out how to seat them apart. So we can do all those things. If the council feels that they want to project a sense of that things are getting back to normal and that's the appropriate venue to conduct meetings at.
I just want to point out an observation I had in watching the county commissioners meeting. They had people there for public comment. They indicated to the folks that they did not need to touch the lectern when they approached. The very first person who got up grasped the lectern with both hands. Immediately after, the chair said, "You don't need to touch the lectern." So
I noticed that too.
Yeah, same with me.
We'll have to position station a sergeant at arms there to eliminate that. But any other comments? Anything else for the good of the order today? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, staff. Thank you, council members.
Nice job on the shirts.